I'm one merchant from Supreme Incubator. We will just start in a few three to four more minutes. We're seeing more participants will join.
Yeah, okay, hi.
So, sir, we are starting now. I will give you a short introduction for you. Good evening, everyone. So we
Good
have
evening.
today.
Good evening, sir.
So today we have with us Prashant sir on the topic for financing options available for startups. Sir is a growing business, corporate, and banking law advocate, catering to small and medium businesses and organizations. Sir is handling matters independently in the area of corporate law, company law, competition law, banking laws, and other business laws. He has appeared in courts and tribunals in New Delhi, including DRT, High Courts, BIFR, CLB, and district courts. He has also been assisting business professionals in compliance, registration, and other legal issues, especially providing quality and timely services to startups and helping them in executing their business strategies. So, sir, over to you.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'll just start in a minute. I hope everybody who wanted to join have joined, and yeah, I hope everybody can see this screen. I have shared my screen with you. The slides are not many. There are just a couple of slides that I have put together very fast, so that you can have some visual while I'm speaking with you. And I'm talking regarding this particular topic. So I'm going to talk about financing options available for startups in India. My name is Prashant, and my law firm's name is Corpus Lawyers. And I cater to, as mentioned, I cater to small businesses, medium businesses, uh, and other businesses in their legal requirements, both in boardroom and courtroom. So let's begin. So understanding the financial financing options available for startups. Uh, any startup to first to bring out their first minimum value product, or to launch themselves in the market, they would need some amount of initial financing, and more often than not, that kind of that financing will definitely come from the uh, person's own pockets, or maybe friends and family. So the funding sources in an ascending order, or not so much in any particular order, would include the following. The first one is bootstrapping. Bootstrapping simply means that you will be arranging funds through your friends, through your family, or your own money, And this does not require any lengthy compliances. It's your own money, and you can put in whatever money you have saved, whatever money you have earmarked for that project, for any particular company, um, into that company. However, when you are funding your business initially itself from your own pocket, it is very important to maintain records, maintain documents of how much amounts you have put into put into your organization and your business, and keep a track of the money spent by you. When you bring in money from your friends and family, in that scenario also it could be important to take care of uh, some legal aspects, so far as maybe you can have a agreement, a short agreement with them for profit sharing, or maybe for returning the money with or without any additions later on. Then, secondly, crowdfunding. The second source of funding for startups come from crowdfunding. It is popular in US, UK, and other countries, but in India, it is not that popular, nor it is allowed so far as equity is concerned. So I'll talk a little bit about equity and debt borrowing and debt funding in a little while. Uh, I just want to go through the sources of funds initially first. So crowdfunding, it is a very popular method outside India, but in India for equity purposes, crowdfunding is not permitted by law. Then you have incubators and accelerators. Incubators and accelerators, they fund the company. They cater to the requirements of funds of companies at the initial stages, when the company is at its very nascent stage. Then incubators and accelerators come in and they fund the company directly through money or through various resources. Then you have angel investors and venture capitals. Angel investors are individuals, maybe HNIs, the high net worth individuals who want to help startups who are into who were earlier startups who were into business and want to invest in companies where they can get good return for their investment, where they see potential, where they see their money growing, and probably mostly they also find a good exit strategy where they can sell their shares in that particular business and exit from the company after making good amount of profit from it. Venture capitalists are, instead of individuals, these are companies. They come together. They are formed under the Companies Act, and then or they may be formed under any other act, and under any other law. They can be any type of institutions, but they are businesses which pool together funds, which pool together money of various individuals, and then their primary job is to help the startups, help people with the innovative ideas, innovative technologies, or any disruptive idea which can get them better returns to their investment in future. Then we have banks and financial institutions. You can definitely fund your financing requirements, your funding requirements from the banks and financial institutions. More often than not, the amount tends to be pretty low, and the cost could be higher. I will return to this slide again, but now I would want to explain what are the different types of what are the different categories of funding that you receive in a company. So, on the basis of the nature of the funds are divided into debt, equity, royalty, and other kinds of funding that may be possible. So, the most popular of these kinds of investments is equity and debt. So, what do you mean by a debt financing? Debt financing would mean if you borrow money from any particular individual or institution, banks, financial institutions, or any other place where you have taken a loan, a soft loan, a hard loan, a loan on which you have to pay interest, or probably you have to return the money. And that amount is a debt for you, and you have to return the money in a future date. And it may not, in most cases, it may not be linked to the amount of profit that your business generates. For example, if I go and ask my friend to give me a friendly loan on, let's say, some amount of premium or some amount of interest, and he lends me that amount of money, and I have to return it by a year's time, let's say, that's a debt. That's debt financing. If I go to approach a bank or a financial institution, and I receive money from them, and I have to pay EMIs on it, or I have to return the entire amount along with interest, that's also debt financing. Apart from that, there are securities in the nature of debentures. Debentures are essentially a debt to the company. So these are also debt financing. Then you have equity. Equity means that whoever owns the equity of a particular organization, or a company, let us say, or a business, that particular person has control and has ownership over the business, right? So let us say, if today I have to launch a startup, and I want some amount of money, I have an idea, I have some amount of cash with me, but I am short of cash, I need some amount of funding. I go and approach my friend and say, I need whatever amount I have invested, I need 40% more. So 60% would be my share, and my um, brought in for bought in part of the funds for the company, and 40% you invest. In that scenario, my friend says, okay, I'll give you 40%, but I would also require you to give me shares in the company, in the business, and give me control over some amount of control over that company or a business. So my friend steps in, and he is also a mutual owner of the company. Similarly, uh, in case of businesses, in case of specifically in case of companies, a private limited company or a limited company, public limited company, uh, instruments in the nature of equity shares or preference shares are issued to people who invest money into a company, and they own some amount of shares. And when you say shares, shares directly relate to the share in the profit and the share in the business of share in the business of any particular organization of that particular business. So equity instrument does this. So I hope you understand the difference between debt and equity. Now, uh, then these are the most important, these are the most general kinds of these are the most general kinds of funding uh, fundings that you bring into any startup or any kind of company for that matter. So uh, when you say debt, so debt and equity is the most general type of funding that you bring in. So I will first discuss what could be a better scenario, what whether debt is better for you or equity is better for you, and I'll try to elaborate on the debt and the equity parts of the debt and equity types of funding that you bring into account. Now let us say that you there are various stages. Now I wanted to grow my company. I got some investment from my friend. Now he's 40% owner. I have taken money from him, and he's 40% owner of the company. 60% ownership is with me. Ownership and control is with me. And now still we think that we need more funds. We approach a bank. When we approach a bank and we show them our credit rating, our proposal, and we ask for some amount of loan. So more often than not, the banks may ask us to provide surety, securities in the form of collaterals, say buildings, or say real estate or any other thing. Or they may ask for some personal guarantee that in case the business is not able to give back the amount of loan taken, we may have to give personal guarantee, and we'll have to pay from our side. So this is a debt instrument. Or let us say we issue some kind of debentures, some bonds to some of the people. Say a couple of my other friends, we did not want to give control or share of the company to anybody else. But two of our mutual friends, they said, okay, we will lend you money, we will give you debentures. In return, you give us certain amount of money, and back in say 1 year's time, or for continuously every year for a period of 5 years. So these are all debt instruments. So far as equity is concerned, uh, um, equity shares or equity participation could be in the form of the initial investment that my friend put in. So, and the initial investment that I put in. So both of us put in some money into our business, and that money is equity. Apart from that, then again we wanted to grow up business in the second stage, in the second stage of our business, in the second stage of our funding of the business. We wanted to expand our business. We wanted to bring more traction. We wanted to bring in more expertise, more human resource. We wanted to pay salaries. We needed cash for that. We wanted to improve our, we wanted to move from our basements, let's say, or our homes, and we wanted to purchase lease out a good proper office, and we wanted more funds. And the amount of money now which that was required was more, much more than our initial requirement. We could go on and seek out an angel investor or a venture capitalist, or maybe an incubator or accelerator. So we can go around in the market and ask for look for people who are interested in our ideas, who see potential in our ideas, who see potential in the growth of our business, and we would sort funds from that. And more often than not, these incubators, accelerators, angel investors, venture capitals, they would want a share in our business. They would want control, some amount of control in our business, instead of just lending money and receiving back interest on it as a general bank would do. So in that scenario, these incubators or angel investors or venture capitalists, they would want a certain share in the business. And this kind of when we issue shares to them, and then what happens is, the control and the share that we had in the business would lessen, because a portion of our control, our shares, we will have to give it up to the investors who bring in money. So in that scenario, what happens is, our share and control, the total percentage of share and control in the company gets diluted. Our control becomes lesser than what initially we started out with. So debt and equity, when we compare it, the pros and cons that we see are laid out here. So if you are, say, seeking finance from a bank, what pros are there in this scenario is that control and ownership will remain with you. You are not shelling out any control, or you are not giving up any part of the control of your company, and the shares doesn't get diluted. You still remain the owner, the complete owner. The initial owners would remain the complete owners and will remain in complete control over the company or the business. Secondly, tax deductions. When you take money from banks and then you pay interest on it, then you can show it as something going out of it. Something going out of the company, and some liabilities owed to outsiders. In that scenario, you can take them as tax deductions out of your total profits. The cons of debt instruments or the debt financing is, first, it is very costly. When you seek money from banks, more often than not, the interest rates are beyond 10%, could be 11, 12, 14, 15%. They are very costly. And with compounding and all those scenarios, you end up paying a huge amount of premium on the amount that you have taken. Apart from that, then that you will also have repayment issues in the sense that you would be leaking cash, you would be draining cash, because more often than not you would you will still have to keep paying EMIs on the loans that you have taken. So every month you have to take out some portion of whatever your business is earning, or even if it is not earning, you have to take out some portion specifically to repay your EMIs. So that is one negative that is there in debt financing. And this ultimately also leads to cash crunch in the organization initially, at the initial stage, when you are looking for more money, when you are you are just cutting corners and trying to make out to trying to pay out bills, trying to pay the general expenses that are bound to happen. You're paying out the initial rents all out of your own pocket and nothing coming in. At that time, when you have to pay EMIs every month, it is additional burden on the business. And this particular requirement, the financing difficulties, is one very important aspect why most of the not just most almost all of the startups fail in their first or second year. It's only because of financial constraints. Otherwise, if they could have continued, and if they had good enough viable product or a good enough idea, then probably the business could have seen better days and profits coming in. So that is one very important, one very negative part of getting debt, because of the repayment burden that it puts on you. Then you have then also, when you take debt, it is shown in the liabilities column of your balance sheet. It hampers your balance sheet. It affects your valuation of the company. And if it is too much, if you have taken too much loan, then acquiring or getting further funding in next stages becomes even more difficult, because the valuations come down and the cost of each percentage, or if each share of your company comes drastically down. So you will have to shell out more shares to get the same amount of funding if you have more debts in your balance sheet. Equity, the pros are, when you ask for funding through equity, the amount and the limit is endless, because it totally depends on your idea of how good your team is, how well you have projected yourself, and how well the investors, the angel investors, or the venture capitalists, incubators, accelerators, all these people, or any individual who sees your companies, if they see much potential in your business, the amount of funds that they can provide is not limited by your credit rating, which is a case in case of debt funding through banks and financial institutions and similar debt funding. Then flexibility of repayment, the very important, most important or the best thing that equity borrowing gives you is peace of mind and calmness, and uh, some amount of stability, because you will not have to shell out EMIs every month, and you will be able to run your company for a longer time with the amount of money that was initially bought in. Then apart from money, the investors such as incubators, accelerators, angel investors, or venture capitalists, they bring in more things. They bring in experience, they bring in expertise, they bring in more resources. And resources could be intellectual resources, they could also be just clients and contacts. So, and that itself would make a huge difference, and that itself could make or break a small startup, because a good idea, properly fertilized with good experience and good amount of support from a good a good angel investor or a good venture capitals or or professional team would take that startup to the next level. Uh, and then again, it gets repeated that there is no drain of funds. The funds do not drain because you do not have to pay EMIs, and the amount that you have bought in, if the agreement says so, would remain in the company, and it is for your disposal, totally for the benefit of the product or the services that you are developing. The cons, again, it's simply the control and ownership. Uh, when you take money from investors, and in return you give equity, then you are giving part of the business to the investor, and you are giving out the control and the ownership of the company. So if so in this scenario, and also in case of profits, let's say in case of debt, once you have paid off all the debts, whatever profits come in, they are totally yours, and they are totally at your disposal, and you can do whatever you want to do with it. You can take it home, you can issue dividends to yourself, and that's totally for you to enjoy. However, if you are giving equity, then the equity shareholders also get entitled to the profits of your businesses. So these are the cons. And in this scenario, what you have to do as a startup is to analyze your own business, your own financing needs, how much money you would need. If you need only very less money, I would suggest that you go for debt financing. If you need good amount of money, and then I would suggest you go for equity. In case you need uh, expertise and other kinds of assistance, in that scenario, I will again say that you go and find, you do not just blindly go and issue equity rights to anybody. Find out good incubators, accelerators, investors uh, who have good expertise, who can bring in more to the table apart from just money, who can help your business grow. So these are the considerations that you have to take. But apart from that, there are other things also that you have to take into consideration, which I'll discuss now. Um, but before going on to this, I'll also discuss certain other new and innovative ways by which you can bring in more funds to your company, to your startup. So apart from debt and equity, basically borrowing money, either through debt or equity, if you are seeking money, apart from that, you can also bring in more money into your company, into your business, through your royalties. Say, for example, you have let us say you have uh, uh, you have a model of business where you are having you want to set up a restaurant chain, or let us say food trucks. So in that scenario, you can just enter into a contract with some people. Let us say me and my friend, we had, if you remember, we had 60-40 share in this business. We wanted to launch trucks. Initially, we had one food truck. We also want to launch more food trucks for our business. And what we do is we approach a couple of our friends. We say, you invest in another food truck, and whatever sale comes out of it, whatever revenue comes out of it, you share from that amount, that share from that particular food truck. So our business has 10 food trucks. We wanted to expand to 20. One of our friends says, I'll invest in 3 food trucks. So we can simply enter into a separate agreement with him that he will invest in 3 food trucks, and it will have our branding, it will have our recipes, methods of preparation, and everything else. And we will be managing the staff, and whatever profits comes out of those 3 specific food trucks, maybe we can share 50-50. 50 will come to our business and 50 will go to him. So this is royalty. Apart from this, you can also have come with your own innovative ideas and you can bring in funds through various other methods, thinking about win-win situations where people who are bringing in funds get something in return for the amount of money that they have invested in. So these are the funding types. Debt and equity is the most popular and the most common ones. Then royalty, I have just explained. This is one kind of one way how you can bring in more funds to your company, to your business. And then there are there may be various other methods, various other ways through which you yourself can innovate. You can think about things wherein you can bring in money from others and offer them something in return, which is equally satisfactory for them, equally good for them, so far as the return on their investment is concerned. So these are the fund types. These are the fund sources that I had initially discussed. And now I'm going to discuss the important considerations that you will have to make, you have to keep in mind. What these are the things that will go on in your mind when you are thinking about funding your startup. So debt and equity, I have already discussed. There are various pros and cons to both debt and equity. So you can take into account all the entire scenario, and you can choose between a debt instrument or an equity instrument, or the debt way of financing or an equity way of financing through banks or through private players or companies, incubators, and all those things. Now, when you are starting a business, initially you may have a proprietorship, but later on, if you want to grow your business, you may be advised to change your company into or incorporate a company under the Companies Act. So the second kind of consideration when you think about say funding is the kind of entity, the kind of business that you are having, right? So the business entities that are there in India are HUF, proprietorship, partnership, LLP, private limited company, public limited company, and one person company. HUF means Hindu undivided family. It is not much. It is a type of business entity in India, but it is not much relevant for our discussion because our businesses more often than would not fall under HUF. Most it would almost all of them will not fall in HUF, but they will fall in other categories. A proprietorship. A proprietorship is simply as a one person. Whenever the person starts thinks about starting a business, he is the whole soul. He has to take care of everything, and at that time, that person is the proprietor. He is the only individual who is running the business. There is no specific act. There is no specific law that governs proprietorship in general, but you may have to say, take certain licenses. You will have to get registrations done through the Shops and Establishments Act, if it is applicable to you. License, you may have to take licenses depending on your type of work. If you have a food business, then you will have to go and take licensing from from those authorities, food and metrology departments, and fire departments and all. So far as the constitution of that particular entity is concerned, the proprietorship, it is you yourself. One single person carrying on a business is proprietor, and his business is proprietorship concerned. So you do not need any special legal compliances or incorporation or licensing or anything, but what is specific to a one particular type of business, right? Now, secondly is partnership. If there are more than one person, there are let us say two or more than two persons. In that scenario, you will have a partnership. A partnership can be registered, can be unregistered, right? If you have a registered partnership agreement, and it is advisable, even if you do not have a registered partnership, it is advisable that you have a partnership deed with you. If you have a registered partnership, then you are required by law to have a partnership deed, wherein the amount of investment bought in by each individual and the amount of shares, the share in that business is clearly laid down. Let us say me and my partner, we had decided in the example that I have given, we had decided that I'll own 60% of the company and of the business, and 40% will be that of my friends. So that share is laid down specifically in a partnership. It is governed by the Indian Partnership Act. Then you have LLP, private limited company, public limited company, and OPC, one-person company. These four type of companies, these are the most preferred type of businesses because they have one very important thing with them, and that is limited liability and separate legal entity. So these in case of a company or a limited liability partnership or an OPC or a public limited company, they will offer you a limitation on your liability. So if you form a, so it's the best kind of these are the best kind of entities to go into and to form if you are venturing into an area where the profit may not be guaranteed, where the success may not be guaranteed. Because in this scenario, if you, let us say, if you have a proprietorship or a partnership and your debts, suppose you've taken debts from banks and your debts overrun the assets in your company, your own personal assets and your own personal money will come at risk, and you will be personally liable to pay off all the debts in your company. However, in the principle of limited liability itself states that in case of limited liability partnership or a private limited company or a public limited company, the amount of liability that a person has is very limited, and that liability will be only the amount that you have invested. However, except in cases where you go to a bank and the bank asks for a personal guarantee from you, that in case your company is not able to pay, you will have the personal liability to pay. Banks would often ask directors to give personal guarantee in certain cases. More often, if you are just starting out, if you do not have, your company does not have much to show in that scenario. However, once the company grows, then overdraft facilities and various other facilities, they are given to the company without taking personal guarantee from the directors or the shareholders of the company. So that's the reason it is advisable to go for these kinds of entities: limited liability partnerships, private limited companies, public limited companies, or OPCs. So except for limited liability partnership, there is a specific act, Limited Liability Partnership Act. For private limited company, public limited company, and one-person company, these are all companies. So these three forms of companies, they are governed by the Companies Act. Companies Act of India, and the latest amended one is 2013, Companies Act of India 2013. Earlier we were following Companies Act of India 1956. So in case of a limited company, you will have limited liability, and so far as the partnerships are concerned, you just have a share. You just have a I have 50% rights, 60% rights in in the partnership, and 40% rights my friend has. So far as companies are concerned, their rights are defined by some instrument which is called shares, and mostly equity shares. There are different kinds of instruments. You have preference shares, you have equity shares, but to keep it simple, the most important shares, the general the shares that we talk about more often is the equity shares, because equity shares are the shares that classify or clarify the owner or the controller of a company. So if you have 1% share in a company, let us say a company has 1 lakh shares, and if you hold 1,000 shares, that means you have 1% share in the company, and whatever profits the company will make, you can get, you are entitled, if the dividend is issued, you are entitled to receive 1% profit out of that company. So when you have a company, and my personal suggestion, if you want to grow your business initially. Once you have a minimum viable product and you want to go to the next level of funding, I would suggest that you either at that time or from the very inception, if you have that idea that you need to seek funding, first level, second level, first round, second round, or third round of funding, you it is most advisable that you initially itself go for an incorporated entity, a limited company. One con that you have in case of a company is, be it private limited, public limited company, is that there are a lot of compliances. Initially, you will have to register. You should register yourself. You should incorporate yourself as a private limited company because the compliances are still way less. A private limited company has to get their books audited every year. They need to have uh, um, uh, meetings every they need to have board meetings every 3 months. They need to have annual general meetings. They need to have general meetings, extraordinary general meetings. They need to maintain various files and records, and they will have to incorporate themselves with MCA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. They will have to upload their returns. They will have to file various forms on yearly basis. But all of this is not that much a hassle if you want to grow your company to and take it to the next level. So I suggest that as soon as possible you take your company, you incorporate your company as a private limited company if you are looking for various levels of funding, various high levels of funding. So in case of companies, if when you ask for equity shares, when you ask for equity funding, you will have to dilute your shares and you will have to offer some amount of shares to the person who is coming in and bringing in more funds. So let us say if your company, both of your friends had 60,000. I had 60,000 shares of the company, and let's say 600 shares of the company, and 400 shares my friends had. uh, when any investor comes in, we'll have to either issue more shares or sell our shares. So more often than not, we will have to issue more shares. And what happens is that in that scenario, the total number of shares in our company will increase. Let's say we have to issue 1,000 more shares, and we will have to, out of those 1,000 more shares, we'll have to issue that 500 shares to that person, and rest we again take equally. In that scenario, I may have 900 shares, my friends will have 600 shares, and 500 shares to the to the investor will go to the investor. The percentage now gets reduced. So this is how the funding, so far as equity is concerned, happens legally. Now, the important considerations, I'll come back to it. So we've seen that we have to consider what kind of borrowing we want to make, how we want to bring in more funds through equity borrowing, through debt borrowing, or through equity participation. Then we have to see what kind of entity we have, because the kind of entity there is, the kind of funding that comes in. For high level fundings, for more better amount of funding, companies registered, incorporated under the Companies Act are the right way to go. If you are looking only for a small amount of funding, then a partnership, you can just give part of shares of a partnership also to the investor who is coming in. Then compliances, as I have already stated, so far as companies are concerned, it's easier to bring in more funds. It's easier to um, get get yourself present yourself well in front of high level or high level investors. Compliances are often more in so far as companies are concerned. So if your funding requirement is very low, you may avoid to incorporate as a company, and you may still go as a if you are an individual, then you can go simply as a in proprietor, and just include somebody as a as a partner, then you will have to, from proprietorship you will have to change to partnership. If you are already a partnership, then you just incorporate, you dissolve the earlier partnership, and one more partner comes in and shares in the profits of that particular organization. One other important aspect that I have forgotten to list out here, but it was stated in one other slide, is limited liability. If you want to go for limited liability, if you do not want to put your personal assets at risk, then again you would go for a company form of business, and you will also you will also seek, let's say, you will also go for a company form of business, and then you will be skeptic about giving personal guarantees to banks, and because banks would generally require personal guarantees, and equity investors would not require personal guarantees at the nascent stage. So again, that is an important consideration. Then valuation. So far as valuation is concerned, as already spoken, if you look for more debt instruments, if you look for bank finances, the valuation of the company gets affected. And if the valuation gets affected, the further rounds of funding will become little difficult, or it may your shares will be undervalued, and you will have to give more portion of portion of your equity to get the same amount of investment, right? If you have less valuation, if your company is valued in less because you have more debt liabilities to be paid to the bank, your valuation will come down. Your each shares value will come down, and that is not good for any particular startup. Then stages of funding. When you look at funding, what kind of funding I want, debt, equity, you can also look at the stage of funding. At the very initial level, what happens is the amount of funds that is required may be very less. In that scenario, it is better that you go for a bank loan, because the amount might be less, and you will not have to give the control of your company. However, if at the second, third, or fourth level, you want more funding. So more funding means it is better to offer equity. But let's say you plan for a four round of equity funding itself. If at the very first stage of funding you go for equity, then your own shares get diluted at every instance where you again offer equity shares. So if you have more than one or two levels of funding, it is advisable not to go for equity equity funding at all levels, because each time you seek equity funding, you are diluting your shares, and your the early investors also would not be too happy about dilution of their shares also. So stages of funding, how many stages of funding you are planning to, that also depends on, that also plays an important factor in deciding what kind of funding that you are looking for. Now you have seen that there is one kind of entity is public limited company. What is a public limited company and what is a private limited company? A private limited company has restricted a very small number of shareholders that is permitted by law. Whereas in public limited company, there is no limitation. You can seek money, you can issue shares to anybody, and you can do it. You will have to do it through a stock exchange. So far as private limited company is concerned, you cannot advertise your shares. You cannot offer it to anybody. You will have to go and individually offer it to your own known business associates or people you know. You cannot advertise. Basically, you cannot have a prospectus. You cannot advertise, and you cannot have an open market offer for coming and investing in your company. But what is a public limited company? So when you recently, not recently, but Facebook at a later stage, they went for an IPO, initial public offering, the first offering made to general public, where the public could buy their shares. So it is somewhat similar to the concept of crowdfunding, but it is totally different. So you are asking money, you are seeking money from the general public. You put out your prospectus. You disclose everything about your company. You disclose all the financials of your company, all the returns that you have filed, all over the company returns that you have filed all over the years. You describe the directors. You lay out all details of your directors and seek funds from the general public. So that is the last stage of funding, when you want to just blow your business up and you want to take it to the very peak. That's when you go for initial public offering, the first public offering, and then thereafter, after the first initial public offering, then you start offering your shares at the second round. You offer more shares, you issue more shares through the share market. So you have to look at the various stages of funding, and you have to plan accordingly how you're going to bring in funds and how you are going to manage that entire scenario of funding inside your company. Uh, then final aspect, I have already discussed this many times during while I was discussing other aspect, dilution of equity. Whenever you look for funding, this is also one important aspect. When you are looking for funding, this is one important aspect that you give consideration to, and it, I think, is one of the most important aspect that any startup would want to look at, and that is the dilution of their equity. So if you may not want to dilute your equity, and you want to have complete control over the affairs of the company. So far as a company is concerned, or any business is concerned, any person who controls or holds more than 50% of the shares of any particular organization, of any particular company or a business, will have the control, will have the say, will have more say over the affairs of the company. So more often than not, the initial investors would like to maintain that share initially, and later on, when you diversify and the maximum amount of shareholding that any person would have is, let's say, 20%. When you go public, maybe the promoter directors would also have just 10%, and remaining 80% would be out in the market. So it totally depends on the amount of majority shares that you have. You would also, for taking all decisions in the company, you would need majority. Company form of business is the most democratic form of business that is there, at least on paper it is, where the majority shareholders and the majority directors, the majority shareholders, they take all decisions on behalf of the company, and that gives them control over the company. So control is directly related to the amount of the number of shares, the percentage of shares that any particular individual or group of individuals or group of investors are holding. So these are the entire aspects that you have to look at, and these are important things that you have to consider while looking for funding. There are various other things that can be talked about, but for the general information, these are the things that I wanted to discuss. These are very important things that you need to have an idea about. So far as legals are concerned, SEBI is Security and Exchange Board of India, and if you issue instruments, if you are a company and if you issue instruments, debentures or shares, the SEBI's laws and regulations will be important for you, and compliances will be important for you. If you are borrowing from banks and financial institutions, or you are borrowing money, in that scenario, the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, which controls the functioning of all banks and banking activities, that will apply, not much on you, but will mostly apply on the banks. And then Companies Act definitely would apply in case of a company. And I talked about royalty, and let's say when you seek funds from angel investors, you would definitely enter into contracts. And in case of royalty also, you will definitely enter into contracts. Contracts are very important part of your business at any stage, where be it funding or any other part. So in that scenario, the Indian Contract Act and the laws pertaining to Indian contract, the contract law of India, would also apply to you. So these are the compliances, these are the laws that you may apply to, that would definitely apply on you, depending on the type of business that you have, type of funding that you are bringing in. And so in total, uh, briefly, this is the entire funding scenario, and the considerations that you have to keep in mind, the sources, and various pros and cons of choosing one method of financing funding over other. So that's all from my side. Now I'll open myself for any queries from your side.
Yes, sir. We already have few questions in the chat box. Shall I read it for
Over to
you?
you.
Hello. Sir.
Hello.
Yeah, sir. We already have few questions in the chat box. Shall I read it for you? Hello, sir. Hello, Prashant, sir.
Prashant sir, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello. अभी अभी आ रही है?
Yeah, can you hear us, sir?
प्रेजेंटेशन तो पूरा आया था ना आपको? So I can't hear. I don't know whether anybody is asking questions because through the system I can't hear you. I can't hear anybody.
Hello. Prashant, are we audible?
There's no mic. I'm just using the system's. Yeah. Same as system. Yeah, I've seen it. I've clicked on it. Yeah, I've clicked on it. Yeah. System. Yeah.
Are you able to hear us, sir, now?
Can't hear you. No, I can't hear you.
Playing from desktop Eforge.
This one's. I think.
Sir, the questions are there in the chat box.
Okay, I'll answer it. So I hope I am audible on the.
Yes, you are audible to us, but I don't know why you are not able to hear us, sir.
All right. I'll start answering from here. All right, I'll disconnect the phone and I'll
Sure.
start.
Okay.
All right. So I don't know why I am not able to hear anything that anybody might be speaking, but I'll start answering from the chat box itself. So Nishkarsh Bansal, one of my friends who is so Nishkarsh Bansal is asking. One of my friends who is a developer asked me that he can develop my product, but in return he wants certain equity. So my question is that will he also need to do sharing in expenses or just profit? So it totally depends on you, the amount of shares that you would want to give to your friends. See, ultimately everything comes down to, you can quantify everything with money. So if you think the value of that particular person's labor equates to one particular amount, then you can just say, let us say the value of his work is 10% of your business. Then you can simply give 10% of your business shares to your friend. In case you want him to bring in funds also, you can ask him to bring in funds, and then you can give 20% shares. Totally depends, because you can quantify, you can equate every single thing in terms of money. More often than not, you
Hello.
can do it. So if,
Tanvi,
let's
what
say,
could
he's
be the
only
possible reason that he...
developing a prototype for you, then you may be happy giving 10% of shares to him because he has done this thing, developed the prototype for you. In case he develops a prototype, and he also is interested in gaining more control, gaining more equity in your company, you can say, okay, all right, you develop the prototype, and you also pitch in with say 10 lakh rupees, then I'll give you 30% shares. It's totally on the valuation that you think is proper for your business and for your business model. There's no hard and fast rule about it. And it's totally between you and your friend. How many boards? Akshay is asking, board seat versus equity percentage. How many board seats are there in a company? What percentage of equity requires to a board seat? So I have discussed this in the webinar itself. It totally depends on the stage. When you are initially there, at that time, there are not many equity holders, so they may initially be just 2 shareholders. In that scenario, you do need 2 board members. So when you are talking about board seats, it means directors, the board of directors. The board consists of directors. So it is mandatory for a company to have at least 2 directors, right? So when you have just 2 people, all decisions or appointments of directors happen in general meetings, and it is done by the majority of shareholders. So it is like a democracy. The shareholders own the company, and they appoint a representative, which is the director, or they appoint multiple representatives. So it is done in a general meeting. So there is no that does not so the board seat would totally depend on whether you have good amount of majority in your in the company. So if you look at if you want to go in depth and go into the details of how this may play out in complex scenarios, you can look at the case study of the Tatas versus Serious Mistri, and you will get to know how the amount of shares will also directly relate to your seats in the board. I hope that answers your question. So Arpit Das is asking the procedure for getting funding from banking and financial institutions, and which banks will be best for education startup. So banks and financial institutions, they totally depend. It varies on so far as it totally varies, and it is their own policy that govern it. However, it's same as any general kind of borrowing. That's, you need to have a good credit rating, and if you are incorporated earlier, so That's why I said incorporate your business into a company as soon as possible. Have good valuation for yourself. If you have more collateral to give, suppose you have some property to keep as security or anything else, uh, and if you are able to give personal guarantees, the banks will be more happy. And one thing that I would suggest is that recently the government of India has come up with Startup India programs, and I think there are. If you go and look for the Startup India program and go for and look for the various schemes that are launched there, and you will find something beneficial for yourself. Otherwise, it's general. But go and look for the Startup India program and the financing options that are given by that are supported by the government of India. Xiaomi Redmi has asked, what should founders know about angel tax? I don't know what is angel tax. I don't think there is any tax called angel tax. I don't know if it is there. I'll check and get back to you. There's no tax called angel tax. I believe that's my belief. What is advisable between angel investor versus venture capital? See, so far as angel investor, venture capital, what is advisable, or even incubators and accelerators? Uh, it's not the type of entity that is there. I would suggest that you go on and find the best possible credible source of fund investor, right? Any angel investor or a venture capital who helps you, guides you, and who have a good track record of promoting businesses, helping them in much better ways than simply investing money. And also you will have to be wary about you will have to be little cautious about any angel investor or some investor who wants to take undue advantage and takes more amount of share of the company and more control of your company, and comes up with the contract which is very not which is very constructive, which is very restrictive for you, and which is not in the best interest of your own business. So I would say it doesn't matter whether you go for angel investor or a venture capital. It totally depends on on your requirement, how much amount of money is getting in, how much help is getting in, how much other benefits that you are receiving from an investor, whoever that may be. An angel investor may sometimes be able to provide you with more funds and more expertise, um, more amount of other resources, say more contacts for your business, to more contacts to grow your business. So it totally depends. You have to find the right person. You have to find the right entity. That's most important. And you have to, one thing very important, you have to go through the investment agreement very carefully and see that you are not being taken advantage of. So that's something that is important. Other than that, you can choose between either of them.
Prashant sir?
Then farmer007.com asks, what is the difference between shares and additional shares? In law, there is nothing called additional shares. Shares are shares. Additional shares are also shares. So there's no. I mean, these concepts do not. I mean, they do not matter. Shares are shares. So if you have shares in the company right now, and you are going to issue more shares in future, those shares will also form part of these shares itself. So each in your company, the shares will have a face value and a market value on which it is traded or purchased, and it will be equal. It does not. It will be same. So it will one share which was initially issued and the second share which was later issued ultimately will not in ultimately after the issue, it will not have a different price, or it will not have different rights or anything else. It will be same. Shivam Sethi what percentage of the employee share pool is suggested. And then what all could be the parameters to determine ESOP pool, like does one's intellect value count? Yeah, so you are asking, I think you are asking about the employee stock option. So initially, if you are initially issuing shares, I don't know whether you should go for employees stock option pool. Instead, rather for initial investment, for initial investors, for initial startups, I would rather say you go for sweat equity. You issue sweat equity to anybody who is bringing in more intellect and value to your organization. Sweat equity of employee stock option plan, that is rather more helpful for businesses which are more established and they just want to create a kind of belonging to the company, and stocks are offered generally to all the employees or certain section of the employees for purchase on discounted rates probably. So I think you are more at this juncture, I think you are looking for somebody looking for sweat equity. Sweat equity is equity in return of the sweat, and that could be the sweat of the labor, the physical labor, or the sweat of intellect. So intellect, yes, it counts. So anybody who brings in more technical inputs or some know-how or some expertise, you can issue them sweat equity. So yes, it counts, and you can also, and once you issue them equity, until unless the terms are totally different, if you are issuing them shares, they will be at the same level. Each share will be similar to that of a normal share that has been issued earlier. So when you are issuing and you are talking about percentage, you will have to keep in mind the dilution aspect. So just keep that dilution aspect always at the back of the mind, that finally you want to keep at least this much amount of shares with you in the company, so far as the company is concerned. So Shivam Sethi is asking by best way to evaluate a company valuation basically. So see, valuation is not the best way to evaluate a company. So the investors, angel investors and venture capitalists, they are very good at it. They would look at the people who are there, the people who are working, and their history, how many startups they have successfully taken to a certain level and things like that. So valuation is only for the sake of issuing a share and for bringing in further funds or for other purposes, and that is done by the valuers. That does not evaluate totally your company. It will depend on various factors and on the human factor as well. Now you also ask, what if one of the founders stops participating, becomes a non-performing assets, basically what all options are there. So once you have issued the shares initially, one of the founders becomes a non-performing non-performing asset, you do not have much, you cannot do much about it at that time. Basically you can ask the partner that since you are not, you can ask, generally request them to sell off their shares to you, because you are not participating and it will hamper the company's progress and it is not going to help. Otherwise, when you are issuing shares initially itself, instead of directly issuing shares, you can have a investor agreement or a share subscription agreement, where you say that I'll issue shares. You do not issue shares at the very instance, at the very first instance. Instead, you issue write down an agreement and you stipulate various conditions which have to be fulfilled before issuing of the shares. If you have already issued, then that person, if you have already on this date, if you already have issued shares to one of your founders, then you have not much option left. You will have to bear with him or so you can simply ask him to sell his shares to you and to the performing people. Or if things comes to worse, the best thing now would be to incorporate another company in another name and carry on that business in that particular company's name if push comes to shove and there's no other option left. You cannot do much because everybody is at a same footing, and just because he's not performing now, because his ownership is there and it is regulated by shares that was issued to him. He is not neither inferior and nobody else is superior just because he's not performing now, because you've already issued shares and everybody, as I said already, it's are on the same footing so far as shares are concerned. So you do not have much options. You either ask him to sell his shares or you incorporate another entity if it's so bad, if the situation is so bad. Or if you had a contract earlier, then you can definitely go out and take a legal recourse and get a legal remedy for ousting him from the company because he did not perform the conditions of the contract, the investor agreement, or the share purchase agreement, or the share subscription agreement. So that's all. There are no other chats available.
Okay. So thank you
Is
so
there
much,
any
sir.
other question that anybody else may have?
So we have already surpassed the time. So let's wrap up this session. Thank you so much, sir. મમ્મા દાદાનો ફોન આવે છે. Hello. So
Chandrika, is there anybody else you can?
I would like to thank you, sir, for this very insightful session.
Thank you, Supreme Incubators, for the opportunity that you have given me, and it was really a nice session, and the topic was nice, and I enjoyed thoroughly my session with you guys, and I also look forward to more sessions in future.
Yes, sir. So, yeah. So thank you, sir. With this, we wrap up our session. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Man, I think someone is asking Sir Prashant sir's contact details. Can you give me a minute to write down the details in the chat box?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Jika, we can share it later. Most of the people have left, so we can share it separately on our group later. You can
Sure. I'll share it with you, Tanvi.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining in. Thank you for
Thank you, sir.
being patient with me. Hello.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.